Hello, everybody. I hope you like the surprise of this time encounter. It's really great to be here with all of you watching us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube live today for another lunchtime talk, or according to the place where you're watching us, this could be also a breakfast talk. And with me here, Martin Duffy, my co-host. Martin.
Good morning, everybody. Nice, or good afternoon for some. Nice to be here.
And this is really an initiative that has the stamp of Martin Duffy. Also, as you see on our names, PhD like me, so we are meeting daughters. And with us today, we have a series of guest panelists, guest speakers that I'm so thankful for them to joining us today for discussing an important topic. Martin, would you like to introduce the topic?
Yeah, in some of our previous discussions that Paul and myself have had, we were looking at, I suppose, topical points coming out of the whole COVID lockdown and moving on to online and stuff. And one of the things that struck us was that strategy development had a very traditional format in the strategy workshops. And we were just wondering if COVID and the move towards online meetings and so on, has that really brought strategy workshops in their traditional format to a conclusion? And if that has, then what are the implications of that for practitioners like yourselves in the strategy development area? Where's the future for strategy development? That's our theme. We're just interested to have a general discussion about that and see what your thoughts on it are.
Fantastic, and we have gathered here a number of experts in the field that I'm sure they will be able to contribute in from different angles. I know personally Miguel Cañas is also a colleague from the IAF. He's a member of the International Associations of Facilitators. So do I think Anja Ebers is still a member, right, Angie? No longer a member, but she's a former member of the IAF, International Association of Facilitators. And finally, Julia Lettinger, which I've located on LinkedIn as a strategy expert. So thank you, Julia, for joining us as well. And I think that by alphabetical order, should we pick that, we'd like to offer you, guest speakers, a few minutes to introduce yourselves and perhaps share something you like with our audience today. By alphabetical orders, it will be Angie to start.
Okay, so we go from first name.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, pleased to be here. I am a self-employed consultant and process guide for teams who want to explore and develop their capability to get stuff done more nimble and more quickly and more enjoyable. And my practice in guiding those groups is deeply rooted in the repertoire of liberating structures. And when it comes to strategy, liberating structures help you to develop quite a robust stance on how you look at strategy. So maybe I can elaborate on that a bit more. A big part of my work was already before COVID virtual. So I might not be the best to answer Martin's question of the traditional, has it changed? But I can contribute of what I might see as possibilities. Now we can build on everything people developed in the past months or year.
Great.
So I'm handing off to...
Thank you so much. And now to Julia.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm Julia Lettinger. I'm in Berlin, and I have set up a small strategy innovation consultancy in 2017 It's called Responsive Strategy. And actually, the reason why I did it was I had been working in classical strategy departments for a while in Germany and in Australia. And I realized that the way how strategy was done there is not the way I think strategy should be done. And so it was classic business modeling, endless PowerPoints. And then that's why I did my own thing. And I started to mix classical approaches with modern approaches, like I know liberating structures, but I started to learn design thinking, agile things. And I'm kind of mixing those approaches and use a agile way of making strategy, and also virtual, yes. So.
Thank you so much, Julia. And this is interesting to have as a background post-it board. It reminds us of the business ahead here. And
that's it's my own corporate strategy for my own business. So I'm still working like that.
I wish I have that. Miguel?
Oh, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Thank you very much, Paul and Martin, for having me here. It's my pleasure to share today's session with all of you. Well, strategy and execution of that has been part of my career and my professional life along many years in the service sector, in the customer service. So defining the strategy and operations around that. But since several years, since last year, I'm running a small consultancy that is focusing on helping organizations in their not only strategy, but more on the service culture. So culture, and maybe this is a topic that we can talk about. And remember what Peter Drucker said about culture. It's a strategy for breakfast.
Absolutely, yeah.
So this is part of my main focus, helping companies enhance their service culture, and also focusing very much on what is probably, Paul, the collaboration and inside the organizations, and specifically the collaborative intelligence, helping companies to develop the collaborative intelligence and the capability of the organizations for facing complexities. That this is something that we will talk about during this today's session. Thank you very much.
Let's do that. Let's roll the sleeves and let's starting here the dialogue, because obviously in terms of COVID and the pandemic, there could be the ones who say, well, for a strategy workshop, we actually need to be face to face. And this is my first question to the panel, and perhaps starting in reverse of alphabetical order, Miguel, maybe. So strategy requires physical presence, or can we do a perfectly functional, productive workshop at a distance?
Well, I think during this example, during this 1 and almost half a year, strategy has been really part of the so many events, online events, gatherings, forums, of course, and well, it's a topic that is present in so many conversations and so many workshops. But the point, I think, is it is so clear now that we cannot think about strategy in isolation from the complexity context and the complexity systems that we are facing. It's something that we have to seriously link both. It is not is something not so linear as it was in the past, specifically strategic planning. That is something that has been very well phased, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 approach. So these linear approaches are no longer valid given the complexity we are facing. And well, this is something that has to be present in the workshops, in the online workshops, and well, it's a very relevant topic that we have to absolutely consider, and this is my point of view about that.
Okay, how about you, Julia?
Well, it works perfectly virtual. So I think that you can even it even works better when you do virtual strategy workshops. So I've almost only done virtual strategy workshops for the last year. And I think at the beginning, it took people a while to get used to technology. So I think the first hurdle is actually getting used to whiteboards and working, collaborating through conferencing tools and digital whiteboards. But once that hurdle is done, I think, and well, it is done now because most of people have used those tools for the last year. I think it works even better because it's easier to document what you achieve. And also, I see teams continuing to work on the digital whiteboards afterwards. So for me, I think it's better because something like that, I can just take pictures or I give it to them. But if we work on a whiteboard, we come up with cool things and they continue working after the workshop with their team in that whiteboard. I think that's much more agile and also better to integrate in the normal operational process afterwards.
Fantastic. Anja, last but not least. And of course,
I was hoping for a bit different point of views, but so at the moment I'm just doing check marks. So my look at that particular question, is it at all possible? Yes, it is, and it's the big advantage is that it's so much easier to bring people together. Maybe trying to elaborate a bit on the complexity Miguel mentioned. In order to navigate complexity, you need all kinds of perspective on the world, and you need backgrounds of different people in order to cope with changes in the environment. So by being virtual, it's so much easier to integrate voices that might not be heard in the past, or to integrate challenging perspectives, which is you need to get a bit more into the into the grown zone, into the challenge, to challenge yourself, not to do that PowerPoints, like presenting mode, but to really integrate different points of view. And I think the timing is perfect to develop a practice around that and to work on creating a virtual place in space, as Julia mentioned, to not do it as a one-off event and then to engage in buy-in. I mean, buy-in, that maybe could be a next perspective. I'm really, it triggers me a bit, that word of buy-in into strategy. If you develop it at eye level, you don't need to buy somebody to bribe her or him to go with you the next steps.
And Anja, just a quick question. Are you standing?
Yeah.
Because it shows a different energy in terms of virtual meetings, people addressing the group by standing or having in a chair. It's quite interesting, and I observed that. Martin, what's your summary up to now?
When you think about the traditional strategy workshops, and certainly in the past when I've conducted strategy workshops, the client has been of a mindset that it's a single event at which we are going to develop our strategy or our strategic plan. And from what the three of you are saying now, it sounds to me like there's more focus on the process. And I'm just wondering if the changes that we've gone through in the last year, are they now considerably more facilitating of making that a process? But is there a need also to re-educate our business leaders and our workers about this more inclusive, more engaging, more participative approach? And Miguel, I think you made the point very specifically there that to deal with that complexity, we need this idea of requisite variety. We need a broader reach of perspectives, and that it's easier to bring those perspectives into our strategy workshops or environments So, I'd invite you to speak to us about that change from the single closed event, limited number of people, into now how limitless is this process? Is it endless? Is it never ending? Can we bring focus to it? Are we in the grown zone permanently, Anja, to pick up your point? Where are we on this journey in strategy development?
I think we are clearly in a tipping point. I like very much what Anja said before about the different backgrounds, as you have highlighted, Martin, as well. I think organizations need to be open to more intellectual diversity, I think I mentioned before, for facing the complexity in the organizations much in a better way. We have to be able, organizations have to be able to respond accordingly to that complex scenarios and those challenges. There must be an awareness. We have to increase and improve the awareness in the organizations for approaching that complexity much better. How to be more inclusive? It's to be more cross-functional in the organizations and not leave the strategy definition at the top 4 people in the board. I think we have to cascade down the crafting of complexity of a strategy. Crafting the strategy, cascade down into the rest of the organizations. Middle managers are absolutely key in defining and building these strategies. And this is something that has to be, at the end, all the company, has to be involved. All the areas and all the departments have to be involved in this crafting of the strategy. Absolutely.
Yeah. Anja, is that where liberating cultures?
So maybe a disclaimer. I have a background in marketing communications, and of course, for me, it doesn't sound very intriguing with coming out with a proposal. Okay, we are educating you about strategy and how it needs to be done. So maybe one thing I discovered as a learning zone for people who are leading other people is to let go of some of their, it's like their inner belief systems of what is expected from them as a leader. And often it's around the topic of control. And for me, when I design something to do the trick of educating without selling, is educating, is to maybe work with a shorter session as a warm up to experience what becomes possible if you open up a bit for more perspectives, for more backgrounds, for more diversity in age and experience and expertise, and often from there it's like to get on drugs, that they want more of it because the results are so much more surprising, and the momentum created by these little interventions can really propel or help an organization to become more vital or more lively. I don't know, what's your experience, Julia? You're working with design thinking.
Yeah, actually, by following this conversation, I think there are two things mixed up, because there's one thing, that strategy is changing, and that's independent of COVID and the lockdown, and then there is the move from physical to the virtual world. So the way we do strategy, or have been doing it the last 20 years, it was like more suited to industrial companies, and big corporates still do it. Like you hire McKinsey, do PowerPoints, and you do a strategy offsite once a year, and then you have a plan and you delegate it all the top-down management approach. So that is, in my opinion, totally outdated, because it's not flexible enough to cope with our fast-changing environment. I guess you've all heard about the VUCA world, right? It's not enough to meet once a year. come up with a top strategy and then never do anything for the rest of the years. That's why I mix strategy with design thinking, and that's why a lot of big consultancies bought design agencies to be able to deliver strategy in a more stakeholder-focused way. And there your interdisciplinary teams come in, right? So how I do strategy, it's like in a workshop format, but not once a year. Like maybe we do one day high-level strategy, but then every month we work on strategic topics together with the related people. And that was like that before COVID. But it was in a meeting room. And now, because of the lockdown, that moved to the virtual world. So we use conferencing tools and whiteboard tools. But that the strategy is changing, that has been before, and is not related to COVID. It's related to the way our world works. Yeah, it's just, we need to be more flexible and agile also with the strategy. That's my opinion.
Interesting, a great, interesting conclusion.
And that's why, like, my company is called Responsive Strategy, because, responsive websites, they adjust to the screen, right? And I want companies to develop strategies that adjust responsive, flexible to the changing of the environment. And there's this movement in the US, it's called responsive organization. I don't know if you've heard about it. And there's a responsive manifesto that's saying companies need to quickly be able to adjust to the environment in that responsive way. And that's my philosophy.
But does that not? There's a guy called Ricardo Semler. He wrote a book called The 7-Day Weekend. He wrote that. It's a long time ago. It's about 25 years ago, and he took over his family business from his father. And it was run conventionally from a strategy development point of view. But this young guy coming in, taking over, he morphed into, he said his strategy for him was no longer than 6 weeks in length. And he said his strategy development process was to ask the question, why, 3 times. So if somebody had an idea to do something, he would ask the question, why, 3 times. And if we were still having a conversation, we're starting to develop useful strategy, but it's not going to live any longer than 6 weeks. So Julia, just picking up on your point, has strategy in the top-down form, in the annual plan, in the 3-year cycle, has that died? Or is that finished? And are we on a 6-week cycle of just endless reactive, opportunistic, grab what we can while we can? Is that what strategy is going to be about now?
Well, it hasn't died, because I still see big companies making the 5-year strategic plan, right? Yeah, that's responsive organization. Yeah. And I think it's still relevant to know where you're heading. So a vision and a mission. I mean, that's the top of every strategy. You still need to have that, because you need to communicate something to everyone in a company. Where are we heading? What do we want to achieve? And everyone needs to be aligned on the goal. But the tactical things, like all the small things, the department strategy, I don't think you need to plan that 5 years ahead and all of it, because it's just too rigid. And I have seen in my own past in strategy departments that a lot of strategy documents never got executed. So they were a story, the strategic story, all the plans, everything we could theoretically do. It looked nice and it was a guidance, but it didn't get implemented because, the technical world came in between. So that's why I think strategy departments should put less effort in making beautiful slides, but more effort in making inclusive strategy workshops where they communicate the broad vision, the mission, where to go, and then for the technical things include more employees and stakeholders in the strategy process, because then it's also more inclusive and not top down, and everyone is aligned and knows how to act when the uncertainty comes.
Yeah,
I wanted to add on it's a bit philosophical, but what I I have the feeling what sometimes in our way is the sheer word strategy, that this is connected with how that's done in the top tiers. That's not done by the normal people. That's something that needs to be researched, lengthy, and it's often also what I'm hearing is it fosters that reactive pattern in people. They look at what are our competitors doing, where are the risks, and so forth. That's also important. But what I think it undermines opportunity and as Julia said, vision, and why do we exist as an organization, and what do we want to drive forward? And you don't develop that in a PowerPoint or from somebody coming in external and telling you what the competitors are doing.
Yeah.
You need to want it. You need that momentum, and
so is that the buy-in point, Anja?
Other people.
Is that the question of buy-in that you were talking about earlier? Is that what is meant by buy-in? That people have to feel they own
no buy-in, erase buy-in. It's no, I mean buy-in, who is buying what from whom? I mean, people belong to an organization, they're working together with that organization towards why it exists. So you don't need to come up with a plan, and then you need to convince people who belong to your organization to buy in. It sounds not at eye level.
I think it's more a matter of intrinsic motivation for at the end joining what the leadership is telling you about what to do. But I think leadership here as well is a key fundamental factor for inspiring people, and it's, the term buying is, well, I don't like so much. I think that inspiring and stimulating, creating that intrinsic motivation that is driving people by themselves to join, and moving ahead with the leadership is something important. But I think during this, 1.5 year, the leadership aspects is fundamental, and it's something that there are so many workshops as well about talking about not only strategy but also the key factor of leadership. And I specifically follow very much the concept of servant leadership. I think serving people, serving the organization, stay at the service of the rest is, particularly to me, is fundamental. And this is something I emphasize too much in my career, in my work.
We are having here comments also on this need of flexible and fluid leadership by Julia Flower. Julia, thank you for your comments and corrections here.
Yeah, maybe I want to quickly mention some of my experiences. So I think great leadership I can see in one of my customers. Because the leaders, they say, well, we need to think about this topic. We want to digitally transform, but we are not the technical experts. So what they do, they hire me, and the management joins, and the employees of the relevant departments, and then we work on what is going to, on the strategy for that area. And at the end, the decision is made by the leadership, but the way to basically come up with proposals, that's done by the people that are most effective and affected by it, and that are closest to the situation or the customer, whatever it is. And I think for me, that's the future, that you include the employees in the strategy making process, but obviously the high level decision, yes or no, should still be done by the leadership. But the leadership can encourage that inclusive process of strategy making.
But can we talk today as leadership as something that is fully concentrated in 1 to 4 members, or it is better to talk about distributed leadership.
Absolutely,
you know, in the organizations. You know, we have not. We tend to personalize too much the concept of leadership, and I think more and more people are accepting that the leadership is something that is becoming more distributed. It is more, a wider concept in the organization. You know, and at the end, not almost everyone can play a leadership role in some specific aspects of the, servicing customers, delivering goods, logistics processes. In those areas, why not to have leaderships at roles at the lower levels?
Miguel, actually, normally I call it roles. So for me, they're different roles, and everyone has a role. Some have more organizational roles, that is the classic leadership, but then some have more operational roles, or everyone has a role, and you're right, and everyone needs to perform in their role. But the more agile way is that every role carries a responsibility and also a certain decision power within the role.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what keeps the company also more flexible.
Absolutely.
But historically, when you look at the older style strategy workshop format, one of the key features of that was creating a safe space where people could, think out of the box and think a little bit differently to the conventional way and so on. The picture we're painting now from our discussion is a lot more fluid. It's a lot more process driven. It's a lot more elongated. So how do we preserve that safe space idea where people will speak up, people will contribute, people will come up with odd ideas or strange ideas in the interests of thinking differently, blue sky thinking? How do we protect that versus what we used previously where we had this nice workshop and we set the ground rules and we ran it for 2 days and we had our dinner in the evening? How do we now integrate that into our day-to-day, week-to-week interactions, which sounds like the direction that each of the three of you are suggesting this whole process is heading?
I would question that safe spaces can only be created by going to a nice hotel and having dinner. I would question that. Maybe back to the very operational, what we talked about, can it be done virtual? Especially virtual can create those safe spaces where you have a one-to-one interaction with people and really have deep conversations. They can create really great intimacy among people, and they're very scalable to feedback what people talked about in small group conversations back to the whole, and there's ways to harvest. And I think that organizations, especially by the last year, they experienced that they are a bit in the driver's seat to create those safe spaces. They can make different use of their company platforms, of their internal social media, and create more meaningful discussion among people and distribute knowledge and out-of-the-box thinking more widely. So it's a bit, I am very optimistic that we will see changes there.
I think one of the keys is to have a clear governance system that allows open dialogues, practicing dialogue, practicing conversations that can be structured and can help people to feel more safe and to realize and noticing that the organization is opening the doors for all of us to talk freely, to talk openly. So having a kind of governance, like, for example, sociocracy or holacracy, this kind of, but especially sociocracy is something that I like very much and I focus as well. I think it helps people. It helps people to really have that space for dialoguing, talking freely, having those conversations, necessary conversations for, at the end, having that feeling of inclusiveness in the organization.
Oh, sorry, I need to take that. I'm muting.
Yes. Oh, it's an interesting conversation. The time flies. We are approaching our 10 minutes way to go. So perhaps we could go now on the takeaway moments, and then I will do some announcements, or something else. Martin, up to you.
Yeah, well, there's I mean, the overarching impression that I'm forming is that our thesis might actually be well founded, Paul. That traditional strategy workshops might just be on the way out, not necessarily because of COVID, but maybe COVID has given it a right good push, and forced us to move down a different road of thinking. I think, Miguel, your last point there about the governance philosophy, the governance approach in organizations, that to get the involvement that's needed, a more enlightened governance philosophy might be needed, and then that can encourage the safety that people need in order to make their contributions. And then it sounds like we get into a process of strategy development. So it's not about develop the strategy, look for the buy-in, tick all the boxes, implement the strategy. It's much more about building a fluid strategic development process that people can continuously interact with, continuously update. And Anja, I think you made the point that actually virtual engagement is significantly more enabling for that type of interactive process to take place. We can bring in more diversity, we can bring in more views and opinions, we can bring them in much more dynamically, we can bring it in from home with the dog sitting in the background. So it sounds like we're a long way down the road of getting rid of strategy workshops and adopting strategy development processes in a fundamentally different way to what has happened in the past.
Absolutely. As we are approaching the final time of this interesting conversation, fireside chat conversation method, I would ask our guest panelists to have this question in mind, because maybe our viewers are, maybe they are CEOs of companies or even a startup founder, and they need to do a workshop, a strategy workshop, or they're thinking about rethinking their strategy. So what would be the one piece of advice you would give to someone that approaches you? Hey, I'm thinking about doing something on my company strategy. So let's start alphabetically. Anja, would you join me up?
It's never done, but don't worry.
I like it.
And I try to rephrase strategy into work in progress. It's work in progress, and it's going to be fun.
Julia?
Because you're shaping it.
Yeah, I mean, along the same lines, and Anja, strategy is a continuous process that you always need to work on, and it pays off. Iteration, try and error, also in strategy, works much better, gives you faster results than too much theory and theorizing. So just be practical and try strategies, see if it works or not, and then change it.
Fantastic. Miguel?
Well, I would insist in what I said at the beginning is any message to companies about don't craft any strategy in isolation, because we are surrounded by complexities. We are surrounded and we are working with complex systems. And at the end, we have to consider that diversity in the organizations. We have to be more collaborative, and we have to, at the end, respect each other. And we are living systems, and we have to work accepting each other in that way.
Yeah, excellent.
Fantastic. So a little bit of announcements, if I may. We are going to have our next show is going to be on the 13th of July, right, Martin?
I think it's the 8th. Is it the 8th of July, Paul?
No, I think it's 13th of July.
13th. Okay. Yep.
Let me see. It's this title. Is coaching a useful tool to create competitive advantage? So again, this is my dear co-host responsibility in picking the teams. And we have already some interesting guest speakers aligned for this conversation. So mark your diaries for the 13th of July, as this will be an interesting conversation. But in the meantime, during these months, we are going to have Digital Collab, which is an interesting event where we are going to talk also about the tools for collaboration. And this is going to be the edition of the Digital Collab Americas on the next 23rd of June. You are all welcome to join. All your guest panelists, speakers here, please join us on the 23rd of June if you have the chance. This is in partnership with Digital Collaboration Academy, Outspace, and DCT. And it's going to be fun because we are going to see how digital tools can actually have an impact on the way organizations behave. And I was just curious about your impressions on digital tools are really making an impact in your own practices as well.
Was it a question?
If digital tools are making an impact on your practices as well, in your own.
Well, in mine, definitely, actually. So I was even thinking maybe I should just offer virtual strategy workshops going forward. But unfortunately, some customers want to turn back now to non-virtual. But I personally think it's the future. I think it's much more effective to do virtual workshops.
Or perhaps a hybrid model, Julia?
Yes,
mixture of both.
That's what I said. But once in a while, the people need to meet. Just, get to know each other, and then it's good to work remotely.
Absolutely. Anyone else about digital tools for your practice? Are they having an impact?
Absolutely. In my case, since I started to, I discovered one of fantastic, outstanding whiteboard that starts with M and ends with L. For not making any advertisement. Yes, I enjoy a lot working with people, around this whiteboard tool and surrounded with this kind of online surveys, and it's fantastic having this practice and having this availability of digital tools. Of course, for establishing dynamics in the workshops. Perfectly.
Absolutely. And we have a surprise to announce, right, Martin? Because we have been awarded by Outspace a digital space for virtual collaboration.
Cool.
And yes, you're going to be all invited, our dear guest panelists, to be here, and we will have a place where we can hold a little bit our conversations and the previous events that we hold, and you're going to like this space, I'm sure, as we are able to comment and keep the interactions alive.
Sounds good.
There's a final quotation. I can't remember who made the quotation. It wasn't me, but I remembered it because I think it summarizes everything that you guys have said in the last 45 minutes. It says, doubt ascending speeds wisdom from above. So when people at the bottom are showing doubt about things, they're confused, that causes the top to become wise. It doesn't work the other way around. The top doesn't have wisdom. So top down doesn't necessarily work. Bottom up doubt, bottom out confusion, bottom up questioning actually is what the top needs to actually bring the whole thing together. So it's doubt ascending speeds wisdom from above.
Fantastic. And I couldn't think of a better way to end this conversation. Of course, you are more than welcome to remain in the studio if you will, as I'm going to also thank our viewers and lots of comments that we are not able to address them all. Thank you, Julia. Thank you, Teba, for your comments here. And stay tuned to us, as we are going to have another event on the 13th of July. Of course, Digital Collab on the 23rd of June. You're more than welcome to join. And our guest panelists will be invited to our virtual space for the conversation to be going. And now let's fire the countdown. I'm excited to share it.
That countdown for
Countdown for the end.
And then we will disappear in the matrix after it.
Yeah.
the virtual world.